and owner Jimmy Haslam are removing Browns reporters and insiders access to the team due to a lot of the negativity and lies that they have been spewing, and particularly about, Shedeur.
Part of the evaluation. I don't care if the team will admit that or not, but this goes on the negative side of the ledger for
It's counterproductive because he's got a sore arm.
Okay, so you're using that as a negative against the kid?
I don't understand.
Jesus, God, would you give him a chance?
Well,
My God,
here's the
because his
thing.
arm's sore?
Yeah.
What, that's a negative? That the kid's got a sore arm?
Yes.
Because he's working too hard?
That Todd Monken has officially reached that point where patience runs out, and when it runs out fast. This is not a quiet adjustment behind the scenes. This is a loud, unmistakable statement to everyone watching the Cleveland Browns right now. The offensive coordinator just drew a bold line in the sand, music, and the message to the Cleveland media is not just clear, it is impossible to ignore. You are not welcome here anymore. That is the tone. That is the energy. And honestly, it has been building for a long time. Monken made the decision to shut reporters out of Shedeur Sanders' training sessions, and once you really sit back and connect all the dots, it starts to make perfect sense. Music, in fact, it almost feels overdue, because let's keep it real. Everyone just spent an entire season watching what happens when the media gets full unrestricted access to a young quarterback trying to find his footing in the NFL, and it was not pretty. Music was not balanced, and IT was not even close to fair. We saw Rex Ryan go on national television and completely lose composure, raising his voice and turning a discussion into a full-on rant about Shedeur Sanders. Music, not analysis. Emotion, not breakdown noise.
He's not there. They haven't been getting the level of access, and that's why they've been acting so on edge. You've seen her going off and all this stuff. Listen, man, they are getting cut off. My man G. Bush broke this thing all.
That moment alone told you exactly what kind of environment this young quarterback was being thrown into. Then you had Tony Grossi taking shots at a rookie for being sore. Like somehow adjusting to NFL speed and physicality is supposed to feel like a walk in the park. That is not insight. That is cheap commentary, music dressed up as coverage. And then there was Mary Kay Cabot turning something as minor as a speeding ticket into a full-blown character breakdown, like we are talking about a long-time veteran with a track record instead of a young player still learning how to navigate life in the spotlight. That is not reporting. That is reaching. And through all of that chaos, all of that noise, all of that constant spotlight, music, Shedeur Sanders still had to wake up every single day, put on his pads, walk into that facility, and go to work knowing the entire Cleveland media machine was watching, waiting, and ready to spin anything into the next headline. That is pressure on a completely different level. But now, that era is over. Music, Todd Monken has seen enough, and more importantly, he understands exactly what is at stake moving forward. This is not just about blocking access. This is about changing the entire environment around his quarterback. This is about control. This is about focus. This is about finally giving Shedeur Sanders the space to actually develop without every single rep turning into a debate on social media.
I get into it, man. This new regime in Cleveland is not playing games. If you was on Funny Business with Shedeur last season as a insider reporter, they are cutting you off.
And let's clear something up right now. This decision is not about avoiding accountability. It is not about hiding anything. It is not about running from criticism. That is the easy narrative, but it is also the wrong one. Monken made this call because he watched how the Cleveland media operated last season, and he decided that protecting his quarterback's preparation environment matters more than feeding a cycle that thrives on hot takes and controversy. That is a leadership move. Think about what Shedeur Sanders was dealing with before he even got a real opportunity. 0 first-team reps in training camp. 0. Let that sink in for a second. The Cleveland Browns used a top 5 pick, one of the most valuable assets in the entire draft, on a quarterback, music, and then barely gave him first-team opportunities to prepare in the preseason. And somehow, the same media that stayed quiet about that decision turned around and blamed Shedeur when things were not immediately perfect. That is the part that makes no sense. You cannot limit a player's opportunity and then criticize the results like the conditions were normal. That is not evaluation. That is setting someone up to struggle and then acting surprised when there are growing pains. That is the exact environment Monken is shutting down right now. He watched his quarterback get dragged into every negative media cycle imaginable without ever being given a fair foundation to succeed. Every small moment became a headline. Every learning experience became a critique. Every step forward somehow turned into a debate. And now that Shedeur Sanders has started to show what he is actually capable of, now that the flashes are turning into something real, Monken is making sure that progress does not get disrupted. No distractions, and narrative-chasing reporters looking for the next controversy. No cameras zooming and hoping to catch a single moment they can turn into a viral headline. Just football. Just preparation. Just development. That is the new standard. And when you go back and really look at what triggered all of this, the context becomes even more important. Because that moment with Rex Ryan, that was not just a bad take. It was a signal of how far things had gone. You had a veteran media personality, someone who has been around the game for decades, sitting in front of a national audience and publicly criticizing a rookie quarterback who had not even been given a real chance to earn his role yet. Think about that. No first-team reps, no consistent opportunity, and still catching heat like he.
It's missing. Something's missing with this kid. This kid talks. He runs his mouth like I could be a starting quarterback with his arms crossed like this. Get your ass in the front row and study and do all that. If I know, the whole league knows. Quit being an embarrassment that way. You got the talent to be the quarterback. You should be. You should be embarrassed that you're not the.
So where was the outrage about that? Where were the headlines questioning why the organization did not properly prepare their 5th overall pick? Where were the deep dives into the development process? They were nowhere to be found because that story did not fit the narrative. That story did not generate the kind of reaction certain outlets were looking for. And that right there is exactly why Todd Monken stepped in and said, enough. Because if the environment is broken, you do not adjust around it. You fix it. And that is exactly what is happening right now. That story did not spark outrage, but going after Shedeur Sanders? Oh, that got attention real fast. That got reactions, clicks, debates, and nonstop chatter across every corner of the football world. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about how this whole situation was being handled. Then Tony Grossi decided to take things to another level, and not in a good way. When Shedeur Sanders mentioned arm soreness, something completely normal for any quarterback, especially one dealing with limited reps and trying to stay ready, Grossi did not treat it like a routine update. No, he flipped it into a talking point. He went on air and mocked it. He questioned toughness. He questioned commitment. He even suggested that Sanders had no reason to feel sore because he had not been playing enough. Think about how backwards that sounds for a second. A player does not get enough reps. His body reacts the way any athlete's body would, and somehow that becomes a reason to question his character instead of the situation around him. That is not analysis. That is reaching for a headline. That is turning something normal into something controversial, just to keep the conversation going. And then things escalated even more when Mary Kay Cabot stepped into the spotlight with her coverage. Now, this is not just any reporter. This is the lead Browns writer. Someone who is supposed to set the tone when it comes to balanced, fair reporting. But instead of balance, what we saw was a full narrative being built piece by piece, music week after week. She called Shedeur Sanders undisciplined. She labeled him narcissistic. And she kept pushing the idea that Dillon Gabriel was the better option. That maybe the Browns made the wrong choice. That maybe Sanders was not the guy. Not once, not twice, over and over again. Article after article. Music, headline after headline. It was like watching a storyline being written in real time before the player even had a fair shot to prove anything on the field. And that is the part that makes this whole thing stand out, because this was not just casual criticism. This was consistent pressure coming from someone with a major platform behind them. When a lead writer pushes that kind of narrative, it spreads fast and it shapes how fans, analysts, and even other media voices start looking at a player. That is influence. That is power. Music, and in this case, it was being used to question a rookie before he even had a real runway. Music, Todd Monken saw all of that. Every comment, every segment, every article, and at some point, he looked at the situation and decided, this is not helping anyone inside that building. So he stepped in and shut the door. And here's where things take a turn, because while all of that noise was happening, while Rex Ryan was raising his voice on TV, while Grossi was throwing out takes, while Cabot was building narratives, Shedeur Sanders did something that honestly surprised a lot of people. He said nothing. Not a response. Not a public reaction. Not even a subtle shot back. Nothing. Music and that silence, that was not weakness, that was discipline, because Shedeur understood exactly what was going on, that he knew these media personalities were playing their roles. Music, he knew the game. Controversy creates attention. Attention creates traffic, and traffic keeps the cycle alive. He saw it for what it was, and instead of feeding into it, instead of giving them more material, he made a decision: stay locked in. Stay focused. And let the work speak when the opportunity comes. That takes maturity. That takes awareness. That takes confidence in your own ability when everyone around you is trying to define your story before you even get to write it. And then when that opportunity finally came later in the season, when he actually got a chance to step on the field and show what he could do, everything changed. He went out there and performed. Not just flashes, not just moments, but real, undeniable production. He showed exactly why he was a top 5 pick. He showed poise. Music, he showed accuracy. He showed command. And suddenly the tone shifted. All those voices that were questioning, they started adjusting. All those takes that were negative, they started softening. The same media that had spent weeks building music, doubt started pivoting fast. And that flip, that says a lot. Because the role of the media is supposed to be simple: to inform, to provide accurate coverage, to give fans a clear understanding of what is happening with their team. But what we saw last season did not look like that. What we saw looked like something else entirely. It looked like a cycle driven by negativity. It looked like character attacks instead of football breakdowns. It looked like controversy being created instead of information being delivered. And that is where the line gets crossed, because when Tony Grossi mocks a quarterback dealing with an injury or physical soreness, that is not journalism. That is not insight. That is not helping anyone understand the game better. That is turning a situation into entertainment at the expense of the player. And when that becomes the norm, when that becomes the environment, it is only a matter of time before someone inside the organization decides to step in and reset everything. When Mary Kay Cabot turns something like a speeding ticket into a full character breakdown, that is not journalism. That is storytelling with an agenda. When Rex Ryan goes on national television and starts shouting about a rookie quarterback who never even got proper first-team reps, that is not journalism either. That is performance. And when that becomes the pattern, when that becomes the tone, when that becomes the standard coverage around a young player trying to grow into his role, then somebody inside the building has to step in and reset the rules. That is exactly what Todd Monken did, because at a certain point this is not about access. It is about responsibility. If the media is not going to handle access the right way, if they're not going to provide fair, balanced coverage, then why should they continue to get the same level of access as before? That is not punishment. That is adjustment. That is leadership saying, if you cannot respect the process, you do not get to be part of it. And honestly, that decision becomes even more important when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture here. Shedeur Sanders is not just another player going through a regular offseason. This is a critical phase of his development. This is the foundation stage. This is where habits are built. Chemistry is formed. Confidence is strengthened. And timing starts to click with teammates and coaches. Every rep matters. Every conversation matters. Every moment inside that facility matters. And none of that benefits from having reporters standing on the sideline watching every move, waiting for a single quote they can twist or a single moment they can spin into something negative. That kind of environment does not help development. It disrupts it. It adds noise where there should be focus. It creates pressure where there should be growth. And Todd Monken clearly understands that. He is not hiding anything. He is building something. There is a big difference between those two things. And people need to recognize that. Because building requires patience, structure, and protection, especially when you are working with a young quarterback who is still putting all the pieces together. Music, and what Monken is saying with this move is simple. If you spent last season tearing this player down, you do not automatically get a front row seat while he is being built back up. That access has to be earned. That trust has to be rebuilt. And right now, that trust clearly is not there. At the end of the day, this entire situation comes down to one simple truth. Todd Monken watched everything that happened last season, and he did not forget any of it. He saw the criticism that came without context. Music. He saw the narratives that were built without patience. He saw how quickly opinions flipped the moment things started going right without any accountability for what was said before, and that music matters, because if there is no accountability, then the cycle just repeats itself. And Monken is making sure that that does not happen again. He made a decision that strong coaches make. He made a decision that real leaders make. He made a decision that shows he understands what his player needs, not just physically, but mentally. He chose to protect his quarterback. Music, and that is not weakness. That is strength. Because it takes confidence to block out outside noise, that it takes conviction to go against the usual flow and say, we're doing this differently now. And most importantly, it takes belief in your player to make a move like this. Because everything about this decision says one thing loud and clear. Todd Monken believes in Shedeur Sanders, and the reality is, Shedeur has already shown he can handle pressure. He has already shown he can deal with noise. He has already shown that when the moment comes, he is ready to step up and deliver. He stayed calm when Rex Ryan was shouting like it was a fourth-quarter meltdown on live TV. No reactions, no distractions, just steady focus. He stayed locked in when Tony Grossi was throwing comments his way, questioning things that did not even deserve a second thought. No clapbacks, no interviews firing back, just work. Music, and when Mary Kay Cabot was building narratives, pushing stories, and practically trying to swap him out in the headlines before he even got a real shot to prove himself, Shedeur Sanders did not flinch. Not once. That is discipline on a different level. That is not just talent. That is mental toughness. Music, because let's be real, a lot of young players would have responded. A lot of players would have taken the bait, said something, fed into the noise, and turned it into a bigger situation. But Shedeur, he played it smart. He understood the moment. He understood the game behind the game. And most importantly, he understood that the only thing that truly matters is what happens between those lines on the field. So when his opportunity finally came, when the lights were on and the moment was real, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He delivered. No excuses. No hesitation. Just production. Just confidence. Just results. And that right there is why everything happening now makes even more sense. Because Todd Monken is not just reacting. He is responding to what he saw from his quarterback. He saw the maturity. He saw the patience. He saw the ability to block out distractions and stay focused when the entire outside world was trying to pull him in different directions. And now he is making sure that going into next season, that focus does not get disrupted. Now he is making sure that the environment around Shedeur Sanders actually matches the level of commitment he has already shown. 'Cause let's be honest, preparation matters just as much as performance. What happens in the building matters. What happens behind closed doors matters. The conversations, the reps, the timing, the chemistry, all of it builds into what we see on Sundays. And Monken is making one thing very clear with this move. The only voices that matter during that process are the ones inside that building working toward the same goal. Not the noise, not the headlines, not the music hot takes, just football, just growth, just execution. That is the standard now. Music, so if you are not contributing to that process, if you are not part of building something real, then you can watch from the outside. Simple as that. Because at the end of the day, the cameras, music do not develop quarterbacks. The headlines do not build chemistry. The opinions do not win games. The work does. And that work, that happens inside, away from the distractions, away from the constant commentary, away from people looking for the next angle instead of the bigger picture. So yeah, the goons can watch from outside, because inside, that is where the real progress is happening. That is where the Real foundation is being built. And that is where Shedeur Sanders is preparing to take that next step. Now here is the real question. What do you think about Todd Monken's decision? Was he right to shut it down and block media access? Or should the media still have that level of access, no matter what? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you not miss anything coming next, because things are just getting started, and this story, it is far from over. Appreciate you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.